What if I told you that the biggest obstacle between you and the life you actually want is you being you? What if I told you that the biggest reason you're not where you want to be is you being how you are right now? You probably have dreams, you probably have goals, you probably have some kind of a vision for the future, but there's most likely a gap between where you are now and where you actually want to be. And I'm telling you, the biggest part of that gap is actually you being yourself. So what we're going to be talking about in this video is the reinvention formula. Basically, how to become unrecognizable in 12 months, how to change your whole personality, how to change yourself so that you can actually achieve the goals that you actually want. So with that being said, as you can see from the title, what we're going to be talking about is the reinvention formula, how to become unrecognizable in 12 months. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, defining your North Star, constructing a new identity, controlling your daily inputs, removing internal distractions, and finally, installing powerful habits. It's a 5-step system to actually change who you are completely from the ground up so that you can actually become the person that can achieve the life you want, that can achieve the goals you actually want to achieve. So with that being said, let's start with the first part, and the first step in this whole journey is defining your North Star. So before you can become someone new, you need to know exactly where you're heading. Reinvention without direction is chaos disguised as progress. So the North Star is your actual fixed point in the sky, a clear, unshakable reference for every decision, every action, and every standard moving forward. Without it, every effort becomes diluted, every habit becomes random, and every setback becomes disorienting. And this is where clarity begins. And without clarity, you will default to your past self. So your North Star isn't just a goal, it's the full expression of your desired reality across the 4 core domains of life, or at least what I consider the 4 core domains of life: health, wealth, love, and self. So this isn't about fantasizing, it's about architecting. And you're designing a life that pulls you forward instead of one that you constantly fight against. And this is your personal mission brief, and every area must be accounted for, or your future will be incomplete, especially if you actually go ahead and do the things that you're about to do. So starting with health, what does optimal health actually mean to you? Like, what do you weigh? What's your energy like when you wake up? What does your body look and feel like? And what kind of strength, performance, or discipline is non-negotiable in your life, in your ideal life? So what you really need to think about is anything related to health, what kind of health do you want? How do you want to look? Like, do you want to have chiseled abs? Do you want to be able to run a marathon? Do you want to be, huge? Or what does health look like to you? You need to actually describe that and actually think about it. Like, actually sit down and think about, what does health look like to me? And actually write down, what does health look like to you? Most people have never done this. Most people coast through life, especially with health. They never think about that. So, and health doesn't include only your physique. It includes, like, what kind of smile do you want? Like, do you want to have good looking teeth? Do you want to have good looking hair? What can you do to actually, like, improve your health in every aspect? The next one is wealth, and that's pretty self-explanatory, but what does financial sovereignty mean in your world? Like, how much do you earn? What do you do? What vehicle are you using to make that money? How much leverage do you have, and how much freedom do you have? What systems, assets, or like businesses are giving you that number without owning you in return? So that, or maybe you love working, maybe you love them owning you, and maybe you just want to work 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, whatever your goal is. So actually write that down. The next part is love, obviously. What kind of relationships expand your potential instead of drain it? And so here we're talking about romantic and social. Like, romantically speaking, who are you with? What's the polarity there? What's the dynamic? What's the depth of connection and respect? What kind of, if you're a man, what kind of woman are you with? And actually describe the type of woman you want to be with. If you're a woman, what kind of man do you want to be with? And once you describe that, actually ask yourself and be honest with yourself. Are you the type of person that can actually attract that person? Because if you're not the person that can attract that person, if you want certain things from your ideal partner, but you yourself don't have them, I'm sorry to break it to you, but it's not going to happen, because they themselves want something that is going to push them, or that is going to expand their potential. So that ideal person that you want to be with will never be with you unless you step up and be that kind of person yourself. And socially, who's in your corner? What kind of friends do you want? What kind of people surrounding you do you want? Who's pushing you forward? Who's refusing to let you slip into mediocrity? Do you have friends that actually work out with you? Do you have friends that actually push you to go to the gym? Honestly, and just being honest here with you, it's very hard to find people like that. Especially if you're if you become the type of high performer that actually, goes to the gym, has a great physique, actually has a great business, has a great relationship, it will be very, very difficult to actually find friends that are on the same path as you. And it becomes very lonely sometimes. So regardless, having that description of the type of friends you want to have will allow you to every time you meet someone, you'll put them through that filter. Are they the type of person that will actually push me forward in life, or are they the type of person that maybe I'll have to push? And sometimes it's good to have friends that are maybe on the way there, and that you see they have the potential, and you see that they can become great, and they're actually working towards becoming great. And then you can be that person for them that pushes them forward and pushes them into greatness, or tries at least to push them into greatness, either through example or through actually trying to push them, through just being there for them in that way. Or, if you have friends around you that you see are they're not actually doing anything. They're not actually going. They're not about it. They're not about that life, basically, in short. Then you have to actually consciously decide what you want from life, and whether those friends are going to be part of that lifestyle and of that journey of you getting that life. And sometimes, and that's the harsh truth, most people I know have friends that they need to cut off, unfortunately. Because in order for you to step into the version of yourself that can actually achieve the goal that you want to achieve, part of that is the people you surround yourself with. And if the people you surround yourself with are, smoking weed all day, or if you want to start a business and they have a 9-to-5 and they're not planning to start a business, or they're not looking into anything like that, and they're not about self-improvement, then unfortunately, if you want to be that kind of person, you'll have to cut them off. And there's another video on my channel of why you need to cut most of your friends, and you can just check it out. But with that being said, basically write down what kind of romantic relationships as well as social relationships you want to have, and most importantly, are they going to support you into getting to the life you want, and are they part of the life you actually want? The next step would be yourself. What does internal peace actually look like to you? What does external confidence look like in your world? And are you grounded? Are you focused? Are you driven? Or are you lost, distracted, and reactive? Do you feel like you're living on purpose, or do you feel like you're just burning time? So you actually need to sit down and think about these things and write goals around all these 4 areas. And when we're talking about the self area or the self pillar, that means everything related to happiness, spirituality, education, just motivation, discipline, all of that, family, yada, yada, yada. So to make your vision real, you need to set goals. First and foremost. And the most effective formula I have seen, most people, when you ask them about their goals, they just tell you, let's say they want to change their living circumstances. They want to live in a better house. Most people, when you ask them, what's your goal? They're just going to say, I want a bigger house. But what does bigger mean? Because if you're living in let's say if you're in Europe, you know what I mean. But if you live in a 50 square meter apartment, technically 51 is bigger. So what does a bigger apartment actually mean for you in your life? And in that case, if we're talking about that specific example, so to make your vision real, I would say use the ABT formula or ABT framework. So it creates clarity, it creates urgency, and most importantly, it creates measurability. So A stands for actual, and that means where you are right now in this area. And you have to be brutal and brutally honest with yourself. Like in terms of health, are you fat? Do you actually have the physique you want? What is the physique you actually want? If you don't have the physique you want, in regards to relationships, in regards to your romantic relationship, if you have one, is this really the relationship you want? Actually think about it. If it is, then what's lacking? Where do you actually want to be? And so basically the idea is where you are right now in this area, you have to actually write that down and be completely honest with yourself. And sugarcoating your current state will just destroy your leverage to change it. And you need to use real data. So weight, income, habits, calendar, your mood, make it measurable or it isn't real. That's the point. So when we're talking about health, if you feel like you're fat, what's your current weight? Actually write that down and ask yourself, like, am I eating the way I want to be? Am I eating the way I should be to achieve the physique I want? So the next step of this formula is B, and B stands for becoming. So where do you actually want to be? And what does that target state actually look like? Because most people don't know what they're actually going for. They say they want to make more money, but they don't know how much money they want to make. And if they do know how much money they would ideally want to make, they don't have any idea of how that would look like. Would that actually be enough? Because most people have never actually sat down and thought about what their ideal life costs. So most people haven't actually sat down and thought to themselves, I want this apartment and it would cost me this much. They haven't actually gone ahead and opened the internet, which is so simple, and just typed out and actually looked at the apartments that they like and how much they would cost. They haven't looked at their dream gym, for example, and how much that would cost them per month and what kind of subscriptions they want. They've never actually sat down and done the math on what their dream life would cost so that they know how much more money they need to make. And so they don't know how much money they need to make. So most people just say, I want to make more money. The other half or the other 40% of people or 45% of people say, I want to make, and then they just give you a random number. I want to make 10,000 a month, but they actually don't know if 10,000 a month is more or less than what they actually need for their dream life. So because they haven't even defined their dream life. So where do you want to be? What does that target state actually look like? Actually sit down and do the math for everything, be it health, wealth, be it love, be it, relationships, be it, yourself, your education and all of that. Like actually sit down and think, what does that look like? Like describe it as if you're already living there and give it color, give it detail, give it feeling, actually make it vivid in your head so that you know exactly what you're going after. And it's not about better, it's about becoming unrecognizable to your past self. So it's not about just optimizing what you currently are doing, it's actually doing something completely different, because what you're currently doing got you to where you are right now. And believe me, and I'm saying this from experience, unfortunately, the person you are right now will not achieve the goals that you actually want in 5 years from now. It's impossible, because the person you are right now got you to where you are. And that person, while it was useful for you up until now, it won't get you there, unfortunately. So you need to ask yourself, what do I need to do? What vision of my life do I want that is completely unrecognizable to what I have right now? And then finally, the T stands for timeline. When will this transformation be real? Like, not hoped for, not in progress, but actually real. And actually give yourself a real timeline, not tomorrow, not next week, not 3 months or something. Because some of the things, let's say you want to, let's say you're making 3,000 a month and you want to take 10, you want to make 10,000 a month. It might take more than 3 months. And what happens if 3 months pass and you haven't achieved that goal? Are you just going to give up on it? No. So in the very beginning, you should just give yourself a date that you are actually going for, and give yourself some time to actually achieve this, because transformation, and especially becoming a completely different person that acts in a completely different way and thinks in a different way, takes way longer than you think. So make it tight enough to feel urgent, but not long enough, but long enough to force reinvention, long enough to actually allow for reinvention. So without a timeline, your North Star is just a fantasy and not really a target. So if you currently weigh, for example, 89.5 kilograms and your North Star version weighs 82 kilograms, or if you currently weigh, 200 pounds and your North Star version weighs 170 pounds at 10% body fat by August 30th, then 89.5 kilograms or 200 pounds is your actual right now. So for example, you have undefined muscle, you eat inconsistently, you don't eat the right foods. You actually described everything about your current situation and what you are actually doing by being completely, truly, and brutally honest with yourself. And then B is where you actually want to be. And that doesn't mean just the result, but actually what is that person doing? So, and how do they look, and make it vivid. So for example, 82 kilograms, lean, vascular, training 5 times a week, completely dialed in. And then T would be 10 weeks from today. That's the deadline. So every day from here answers to that specific deadline. And that's how you actually describe a goal. A to B in T. So basically from actual to becoming in the specific timeline. And most people know what they want vaguely, and that's exactly why they never get it. More money, better health, stronger relationships, these mean nothing to your nervous system. So clear outcomes create powerful decisions, and vague outcomes create hesitation, confusion, and most of the time self-betrayal, and you actually never follow through. And here's the hardest truth. Clarity is not enough. So just knowing what you want does not change your life. So a lot of people know actually what they want. If you've been into self-improvement or self-development for any amount of time, you probably have set some goals. So you probably know what you want. However, just knowing what you want will not change your life. It makes you just aware of the gap from where you are to where you want to be. And without identity change, the clarity just becomes pain, not power. So you're just going to know the gap, and without changing who you are as a person, you won't get there, and then it just becomes pain. It just becomes like this vision that you want to achieve, but you never actually get to. So this is why vision boards fail. This is why goals don't stick, and this is why you keep looping. If your current identity contradicts your North Star, your identity always wins, because it's who you are. So the vision isn't enough. You must become someone who can inhabit that vision without friction. And so now that you've mapped the destination, now that you know where you actually want to go and where you are, where you want to go, and in what timeline you want to do it, who's the one walking that path? So it's time to deconstruct and redesign the identity that must carry this mission to completion. So that leads us to constructing a new identity. So you don't get the life you want by upgrading what you do. You get it by upgrading who you are. And this is where most people completely miss the point of transformation. They try to add habits on top of a broken identity. They try to pursue goals while carrying the same beliefs, the same fears, and the same subconscious patterns that caused the current reality in the first place. And that never works, because at the core of every result is a role. and you're playing a character, and that character has rules until you rewrite the rules. The game stays exactly the same. So reinvention means becoming something entirely new, not tweaking the current version of you, not just taking yourself as you are right now and making yourself a little bit better. It's not about improving the edges. It's not about optimizing mediocrity. It's about becoming new, meaning burning the old blueprint and starting from zero. Most people are terrified of this because they'd rather feel familiar than free. And if you want a life you've never lived, you need to become a version of yourself that you've never been. So let go of the story you've been telling yourself so far. You're not your failures. You're not your childhood. Let go of your ex. Let go of your job title or your bank account that is right now a bit right there. Let go of the story with your ex. Let go of what you work as. And the longer you cling to that identity, the longer you will relive its consequences. The longer you're going to be in its grasp, basically. So you're not obligated to remain consistent with your past. You're not obligated to remain consistent with even your present, to be honest. Like, you don't have to act like the person that is making $3,000 a month. Because if you do, that's all you're going to get. So you can choose a different standard, a different rhythm, a different code of conduct starting today. And that power is terrifying, but it's also everything you need. Imagine for a moment you were just born. So no history, no habits, no guilt, no limitations. You're just a blank canvas. And you get to choose intentionally, precisely, and completely who you actually become. So where do you live? What does your home look like? What is in your space and what is not? What does your physique look like? How do you move? What's your energy and posture? What's your sexual presence? Like, how do you carry yourself in general? Who are they at their core? What's their tone, their attitude, their conviction, their drive? What's their character of that person that you actually want to become? Do they flinch under pressure or do they lean into it? Do they walk into rooms with gravity or do they seek to kind of disappear and blend into the background? What do they do daily without exception? Without exception, like what are their non-negotiables? What does their first hour look like when they wake up? What do they eat? What do they say? How do they talk? How do they focus on the task they need to focus on? What do they actually focus on? Do they procrastinate or do they execute unapologetically? How do they speak? What words do they never say? Which is very important, is the type of the language they use. What kind of language do they use and what kind of language do they forbid themselves from using? For example, for me, I never use the word tired for myself. I obviously, like, sometimes it might slip. But most of the time, like 95% of the time, I never use the word tired. Why? Because I feel like it's infectious. If I say to myself that I'm tired, I feel like my whole day will go that way. And maybe it's some kind of a confirmation bias kind of thing, but at the end of the day, I prefer to not use that word. I might say something completely different. I will actually look for the real reason of why I might be tired, but not use the word tired. So for example, if I'm tired because I've actually had a very bad night of sleep, I might just say, hey, I had a very bad night of sleep, but I'm not going to say I'm tired. And so one of the things that you really need to think about is what kind of language would that ideal version of you use, and what kind of language do they not use? And so you need to write out this new identity in vivid, specific detail. This isn't like some kind of a vague ideal. This is a character sheet. So you're building a version of you with the clarity and intensity of a novelist constructing a protagonist. So who are they at their core? What's their tone? What's their attitude? What's their conviction? What are their beliefs? What's their philosophy for life? What is their drive? Do they flinch under pressure, as I said, or do they lean into it, and so on? And do they use language that affirms their vision, or do they communicate with sharpness, or do they communicate with like some kind of like sludge, like somebody that has been smoking weed all day, for example? What kind of people do they attract and associate with? Do they tolerate weak, needy energy around them? Do they draw others in with clarity, or do they confuse them with inconsistency and like with words that mean absolutely nothing? Are they decisive or not? All of that. Do they actually follow the habits that they've set up? Do they actually follow what they've set out to do in the beginning of the day or not? And you need to read this new identity every single morning out loud with full certainty until the neural pathways are no longer optional in your brain, but automatic. So your brain doesn't believe what's actually true. It believes what's repeated. And identity is installed through ritual and reinforcement and not intention. So if you make something a habit every day, so for example, bonus points, if you actually write out this vision of who you want to be, or at least the main parts of who you want to be and the main character traits of who you want to be every single day by hand. Like you can read that. Sometimes you might be busy in the morning and you might not have the time to actually sit down and write the version of you that you actually want to become. But if you actually have the time and sit down and actually by hand with your pen and paper, actually write down the type of person you want to become, the character traits of that person, who they are, almost like you're actually constructing a character for a movie or for a book or whatever kind of media you enjoy. Imagine that you had to create this character. This is you. This could be you. If you just sit down and write them down. And then if you do that repeatedly enough, and if you read that every day, if you do that consistently, or if you write that down consistently, you'll become that person. Believe me, you'll become that person. There's no way you won't, because it's going to be reinforced in your mind every single day, every morning, every evening. You're going to be reinforcing that person. You're going to be reminding yourself of that person you actually want to become. And everything you do in your day, you'll remember that you did that in the morning. You'll remember that, hey, I wrote down I want to be acting like this kind of person every single day. And then you'll become that person over time. Because just by doing that, your habits will change. Just by doing that, the way you act, the way you carry yourself will change because you're doing it every single day. And if you don't consciously choose who you're becoming, you unconsciously recreate who you've always been. So it's very important that at the same time, you make a list of what the old identity would do every single day and refuse to act that way again. Now, I don't recommend you actually write that down every single day. I think it's better to focus on who you want to become, but it is important to read how your old self was acting. What is your current or old kind of character, and read that every single day and tell yourself, this is who I don't want to be anymore, and this is who I actually want to be. So Dan Coe, you probably know Dan Coe, he talks about the anti-vision. Basically writing down what you actually don't want in your life and reading that, because that helps with you actually achieving what you do want. And so the same goes for your identity. Write down what they are actually doing right now and what they've done to get you to the place you are right now. And then commit to not acting like that anymore, and commit to acting like that person that you're writing down every day or reading every day that you want to become. And if you don't consciously, as I said, if you don't consciously choose who you're becoming, you'll unconsciously recreate who you've been. So the human brain defaults to familiar patterns, even if they're destructive. That's why you see people who want to, for example, stop using drugs, but they continue using drugs, regardless of whether the drugs are addictive or not. The drugs themselves are just a familiar pattern in a way. And people cling to familiar patterns, even if they're destructive. Identity isn't discovered, it's decided, it's built, and then it's lived, and then it's reinforced. So if your North Star self is shredded, savage, financially sovereign, then your identity must reflect that. Early mornings, calculated aggression, disciplined solitude, surgical execution, beliefs of I do what needs to be done, I don't flinch, everything I touch moves, stuff like that. But identity alone isn't enough, because identity is shaped by what surrounds it, and what surrounds it is what enters it. So To reinforce your new character, you also must ruthlessly control the inputs that feed it. So that brings us to the next step of actually reinventing yourself, which is controlling your daily inputs. So what you allow in your system, physically, mentally, determines who you become. Every piece of content, every sound, every conversation, every bite of food, every glimpse of your environment, these are not neutral. They are always shaping who you are in real time. Whether you're aware of it or not, your inputs are constantly programming your identity, feeding your beliefs, and reinforcing your behavioral default. Because let's say right now you love watching action movies. That's part of your identity. You love watching action movies. So if you keep watching action movies instead of, for example, watching documentaries, you're reinforcing the current identity. You're not reinforcing the identity that the future identity. And this is maybe a bad example, but you understand what I mean. Everything you consume shapes who you are because it's your interest. And your interest is part of who you are. So if you want to become somebody different, you need to change your interests. You need to change what you consume. And what you consume changes based on, obviously, your interests. So if you're not aggressively curating those inputs, whether that's mentally or physically, then you're unconsciously inheriting values, desires, and patterns from the lowest common denominator of the world around you. And that's not transformation, that's infection. So the brain doesn't just passively record what you consume. It reconfigures itself based on repetition, emotion, and immersion. So what you consume repeatedly becomes part of you. Your synapses fire in response to what you see and hear the most. And over time, those pathways become default modes of thought and behavior. You aren't just influenced by what you consume, you're quite literally rebuilt by it or built by it. Which means every piece of input is either reinforcing your current self or rewriting it toward your future self. So when you scroll social media full of nonsense, distractions, emotional bait, and filtered fantasies, you're embedding a fractured attention span. You're embedding an addiction to low-level dopamine and a warped sense of normal. So you begin to crave validation instead of growth. You chase stimulation instead of execution. You normalize mediocrity wrapped in aesthetics. And slowly, your standards slip, your clarity fades, and your capacity for sustained focused work atrophies. But when every input in your environment is deliberately aligned with the identity you're building, your life starts locking into a new trajectory automatically. You wake up with direction because the world around you keeps whispering who you are actually becoming. And you don't have to rely on willpower when your default surroundings are engineered to keep you sharp, focused, and aligned. When everything in your environment, including your inputs, is designed in a way to reinforce the person you're becoming, you don't have to rely on willpower. You don't have to force yourself to do anything. And so what you actually need is a full spectrum audit of your inputs, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, digital. Don't rationalize. Actually, sit down. Don't defend. Don't say it's not that bad. If it's not helping, it's hurting. There is no neutral. So look at what you consume online and offline: social media, podcasts, YouTube, books, email subscriptions, music. Does it actually energize you? Does it clarify you? Does it drive action, or does it drain your focus and lower your frequency? Every algorithm is trying to hijack your identity for its own agenda. It's true. If you're not filtering it, you're being formed by it. So look at what you eat, look at what you drink, look at what you supplement. You're not just feeding your body, you're actually feeding your neurotransmitters. So this is about nutrition. Your hormones, your ability to focus and execute, they're all being fed by what you eat, drink, and supplement. So low quality food equals low quality cognition. You can't feel sharp if your blood sugar is crashing. Your gut is inflamed and your hormones are tanking. So when you eat like the future version of yourself would eat, you're reinforcing the belief that you're already becoming him or her. So look, when it comes to people, look at who you talk to, look at who you listen to, look at who you spend time with. Every voice in your life is either a mirror or a mold. And so some people reflect back to you your current level, keeping you small, comfortable, keeping you slow. And honestly, I hate to say it, but sometimes it will be your family. Sometimes it will be your significant other, or who you think is your significant other, unfortunately. And others shape you by holding you to higher standards, confronting your bullshit, and embodying what you're aiming for. For me, one of those people is definitely my brother. Like anytime I come up with an excuse, my brother will be there and say, hey, this is an excuse, in one way or another, not in that specific way, but he will say, hey, you could be doing this instead. Like, why are you not doing this? And so look at when we're talking about self-talk, another part of this is your self-talk. So look at what you say silently to yourself. Your mind is always listening to your thoughts, to your literal, to the things you say out loud. It's always absorbing. It's always obeying. And so if you constantly say, I'm tired, which I said earlier, or I'll start tomorrow, or this is too much, or maybe I'm working a bit too much, you're actually hypnotizing yourself into failure. So build a new mental script. Craft phrases that declare who you are becoming, not who you've been. Repeat them until they're embedded. So for example, let's say you go to the gym. And usually one thing I like to do here and there is actually force myself to act like somebody completely different. And which is basically the idea of this whole video. And what I like to do, and in the gym, it's very practical to do, very easy to do. Let's say you go to the gym. If you go to the gym, you spend 45 minutes there. That's your usual gym workout routine. Try a few times a month, maybe a couple times a week even, if possible. Actually work out for double or triple that time and see how you feel. Actually force yourself to do it. Just because maybe you've never done it. Maybe you've never worked out for 3 hours straight. And just the fact that you actually did it once will now open your mind to the possibility of what you can actually do. And it's crazy because from there, once your mind is open to that possibility, once you know what you can actually do, once you know that one time you work 3 hours, you'll never look at yourself the same way. So sometimes these things happen randomly. So sometimes a new identity just forces itself on you because of necessity. So you hear a lot about that with people that experienced some kind of trauma, whether it's in their childhood or in their adulthood. They experience some kind of trauma or some kind of a bad experience that basically forced a completely new identity, forced a completely new life. And what we're trying to do here is actually force ourselves into that same feeling, not necessarily the bad feeling of a trauma, but more so the feeling of actually changing who we are so that we can live the life we actually want. So a lot of people that have gone through trauma, they realize they've been living a life that they don't actually want. So for example, recently, one of the things that happened to me, I was hit by a car. And honestly, I think it was a pretty hard hit. And I honestly feel like if it wasn't me going to the gym for now close to 10 years or more at this point, I feel like if I was more frail than what I am, I'm not saying I'm the biggest guy in the world or something like that and super muscular, but if I was skinnier than I am, I feel like that could have at least broken something in my body, or I could have ended up in the hospital in one way or another. And after that realization, I basically started rethinking my whole life again. I do this very often, but this time something happened externally that I didn't force, that just basically made me rethink things. Now, what we're trying to do here is basically doing it ourselves on purpose, forcefully. So, or not forcefully, but on purpose. Yeah, basically. So build a new mental script, craft phrases that declare who you are becoming and not who you've been, and repeat them until they're embedded. And once the audit is done, you begin the purge. And this is non-negotiable. You cannot keep the old inputs and expect a new identity to emerge. So you can't still watch rom-coms and at the same time think that you're going to be like a billionaire. You can't, because a billionaire most likely 99% of the time, and I'm assuming because I'm not a billionaire, but I'm assuming that 99% of the time, they're not watching rom-coms in the evenings. They're not just chilling, eating chips, most likely, depending on who you're looking at. But if you want to be the type of, let's say, if you want to be a billionaire, but also you want to have a great body, you most likely are not going to be watching rom-coms and eating like chips, right? So you can't keep doing the same things and expect a new identity to form. Basically, they are incompatible frequencies, so one must die. So you need to unfollow, unsubscribe, delete, block, throw out, avoid. If it doesn't serve your mission, it's a liability. So if their content, voice, or energy isn't sharpening you, then it's most likely softening you, and you need to get rid of it. So right now, go to your Instagram. If you follow a bunch of like OnlyFans models, actually unfollow them, because they're actually keeping you from, if you're single, they're keeping you from finding the person that you actually want to be with. Just actually following them, just actually seeing them on your Instagram page is keeping you from finding the person that you want to find. Regardless if you believe this or not, it is true. So entertainment is fine, but if it becomes a sedation, it's poison. So know your line and respect it. And restructure your physical and digital environment as well to eliminate friction between you and your higher self. So keep it clean, keep it minimalist, and set for execution. No clutter, no distraction, no video games, no porn sites. Leave all of that. No temptation. Remove apps that hijack your attention. Turn off your notifications. Use it as a tool, not a leash. Like, for example, if you grab my phone, I have no apps on it, basically. I have like WhatsApp to talk with my family. And other than that, I have like my grocery like app that I order groceries with. And that's it. I don't have Instagram on my phone. I never do, because the only way I can check Instagram is from my desktop. And even on my desktop, it's limited. So remove any apps that hijack your attention. Create psychological space from people who drain your energy or pull you back into old identities as well. You don't owe anyone access to your focus. You don't owe anyone, including not your family, even your closest people. You don't owe them your time, your focus, or your presence, especially not when you're rebuilding who you are. Even one low frequency conversation can actually unravel hours of internal work. So guard your field like it's sacred, because it is. And I'm going to give you a very, very simple example. Let's say, as a part of who you're becoming, you've decided that, you don't want to drink alcohol, let's say. Whether I recommend that or not, that's a completely different story. But let's say that's part of who you want to be. And all of a sudden, a friend texts you, a friend from the past, and he's like, I'm in town. Let's go out, have some drinks. Just that conversation can derail a month of work. You might have been sober for a whole month, and just having that conversation, just somebody texting you and you actually replying and involving yourself into that can derail a whole month of work. So guard your field like it's sacred, because it is. And now that you've cleared the noise, you must refill the system with aligned high-frequency inputs. If you don't, the void will be filled by default. And the defaults are death to transformations. So, because you're just going to default to what you used to do. So, first off, when it comes to mentors, surround yourself digitally or physically with people who live the life you're actually building, or who you want, or the life that you actually, or have the life that you actually want to have. Watch how they talk, watch how they move, watch how they think, watch how they operate. Even more importantly, if you can, watch their inputs. Look at their inputs, what they are consuming, and mirror their patterns until they become yours. If you can't be near them physically, study them obsessively and make them part of your daily input stack. So, and make it a limited amount. So you can't, one thing I see a lot of people do is they watch everybody. And as long as they have the kind of life that they want to have, they just believe everything they say. And they have like 100 people that they watch. And on one hand, that's better than, watching mindless shit online. But on the other hand, you have to limit the amount of information and the amount of people you actually follow, because you want to embed their beliefs, you want to embed their way of thinking into the way you are thinking. And if it's too much, you won't be able to do it. So limit the amount of people you do follow. And when you do, those people, that limited amount of people who you want to become like, or who have the life that you want to have, follow them. Look at how they talk, look at how they move, look at how they think, look at how they operate. If they have for example, some of the people I like to follow have their favorite books published online. And so now I can go ahead and actually read the books that shaped them and into the person they are. So if you can find their inputs, consume those inputs that they consumed to become who they are, and mirror their patterns until they become yours. So also choose inputs that activate you, challenge you, that upgrade your belief system, and teach you how to execute at a higher level. So read things that bend your perspective and show you what's possible. So read things that actually bend your perspective and show you what's possible. Books are basically like time machines, compressed consciousness from minds sharper, wiser, and most likely more evolved than yours. So if you don't read, you're choosing to stay trapped in the mental architecture of your past self. And when it comes to books, choose books that reconstruct your worldview on yourself, on your money, on time, power, energy, relationships, your identity. So examples are like Atomic Habits, Cybernetics, The War of Art, The 48 Laws of Power, Can't Hurt Me, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, Mastery. And you most likely know these books already. The thing is, most people haven't actually read them fully. Most people haven't internalized them. Most people haven't even, taken notes on them or something like that. And for most people, they just read the books that are super popular for a little bit, and then that's basically it. That's all they read, if they even read self-development books. So build the inner scaffolding that supports the upgraded version of you. And another thing about books is add books that sharpen execution. So marketing, sales, negotiation, communication systems. 100 Million Offers, for example, from Alex Hormozi. Influence by Robert Cialdini. Pitch Anything, Deep Work, The One Thing. Give your new identity weapons, knowledge that actually converts into leverage. And finally, reflect. Reread key books monthly or quarterly. And you're a different person every 90 days. What you extract from the same books evolves with you. And so highlight, annotate, and then review during morning rituals or Sunday resets. Now, when it comes to videos, watch talks, interviews, breakdowns, etc. that actually help you become the person you want to become. Most people use video content to escape reality. What you should be doing is using video content to build your reality. And so watch content that actually makes you feel small in the right way, not in a shameful way, but in a wake up kind of way. So these inputs reframe your ceiling. They trigger emotional pain and ambition simultaneously and they're fuel for evolution. So prioritize long form over short form. You don't need 60-second hits of hype. And honestly, if you're like watching reels and shorts every single day for like an hour a day or something, do something about that. Believe me, like this is really bad for you. For like, without going into it too much, just don't do it. So you need hour-long downloads that rewire your nervous system. So one 90-minute documentary, for example, can shift more in you than 90 reels ever could. Or to be honest, like most of the time, a 90-minute documentary, even if it's something like that you think is unrelated to success, like a documentary on World War I, for example, will shift more in you than 90 videos. Not 90 reels. We're talking about 90 videos ever could. And always watch with a notebook. So what I do is I always have either my phone or a notebook. And on my phone, I have Notion. And I always watch with that open or with an actual physical notebook. So for example, I have a Moleskine right here. And I always watch with that. So watch with a notebook, don't consume passively, actually mine the gold and integrate it. And long form conversation, so the next thing you could do is watch podcasts, but actual podcasts that actually help you in life. So long form conversations is one of the most powerful identity shaping tools available, because podcasts don't just transfer information, they transfer perspective. So listening to high level thinkers, builders, killers, and creators that articulate their frameworks gives your subconscious new structures to copy, to test, to absorb. And the more time you spend immersed in their minds, the less tolerance you'll have for low level thinking in yourself or in your circle. So make podcast listening a non-negotiable part of your morning walks, your cardio, your cooking time, your commutes. And back to books, the same goes for audiobooks. Actually, like, find one app that is now becoming more and more popular is 11 Reader. So it can turn any ebook into an audiobook. So that's one. The other thing is actually buy audiobooks and listen to them in your downtime. Anytime you're not doing something that actually requires your head to think or your brain to think, you could be listening to things that actually improve you as a person. So anytime you're, as I said, anytime you're like walking or stretching or, having a low intensity training or, walking or doing cardio or just cooking or anything, or having commutes or like being in fucking in public transport, you could be listening to all of that. So pair it. One of the biggest tips I have is just pair it with movement. So anything or that requires that makes your body busy, but not your brain busy. So basically walking, stretching, sometimes even just weightlifting. If it's a more of a chill session, you can be listening to a podcast in the meantime. Now, and basically feeding the mind while moving the body. So when choose episodes that actually challenge your emotional frameworks and beliefs and not just give you surface level tactics, because tactics change actions, but beliefs change identity. So go for both, but lead with depth. So the next thing is audio. So sound is identity programming. The music you listen to programs your identity. So the tones you listen to, the frequencies, the background noise, it all conditions your emotional baseline. Use audio with surgical precision. So what you could do is build multiple playlists mapped to specific identities or states. So for example, if you're going for focus, you could be going for music that has no lyrics, has low beats per minute. It's a bit more repetitive, trance-inducing, ambient or cinematic. When you're going for flow, you can use techno or lo-fi or binaural theta tones for writing, creative work, or deep strategy blocks. And when it comes to frequency, you can start and end the day with specific sound design. So in the morning, you can use a specific track to anchor the new identity the moment you wake up. And in the evening, you can use ambient tones to slow your brain and transition into reflection. And another thing that's optional is you can add subliminals or self-recorded affirmations in your own voice to prime your subconscious. So one thing I used to do in the past, I don't do it admittedly that often anymore, is I would actually record my affirmations on my phone, and then I would repeat them while working out. So I would put the recording on and just listen to it for 2 hours straight while lifting weights, basically. So another thing you could do is watch documentaries. So real life stories of obsession, mastery, and relentless execution can install new emotional baselines for what's normal. So it's especially like, for example, war documentaries, they definitely set a new emotional baseline for and a new perspective for what's actually normal and what's actually hard. So when you see how far others have taken their discipline or their madness or their vision, or how far they've committed, for example, with war documentaries, it becomes impossible to accept laziness. It becomes kind of impossible to accept softness or excuses in yourself, because you wake up one day and you think to yourself, oh, god damn, like going to the gym is hard. And then you remember about the documentary you watched yesterday where some guy got his leg blown off basically in war. And all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself, this is actually not that hard compared to that. And you've basically rewired the perspective you have about difficult things. And so Watch stories of athletes, CEOs, artists, military leaders, scientists, absorb their rituals, their pain tolerance, their pattern recognition, and journal the moment that triggered any emotion or awe or discomfort. And that's where your identity is actually being challenged. So anytime you're watching something and you feel some kind of an emotion, or you're in awe of something, or you feel some kind of discomfort, that's because your identity is being challenged in that moment, because your current identity can't believe that somebody could be operating in that way. And so watch your top 3 documentaries every quarter and let the themes become part of your mental code. So don't watch to relax, watch to actually extract something, to upgrade, to recalibrate your edge. And finally, look at the language and the rituals you have. So when it comes to language, the words you use internally and externally, so in your head, and also the words you actually speak out, they are shaping your reality in micro increments. So erase weak words such as try, maybe, or I'll see, or I feel like, or kind of, or should, and use words like I will, or this is happening, or locked in, or non-negotiable, or let's move, stuff like that. And speak to yourself the way a general speaks to an elite soldier. Basically, clear, commanding, conviction-based. There's no second guessing, basically. And create input rituals that lock in your new operating system. So listen to audio that sets the tone, read a paragraph from your identity script in the morning, review your North Star in the morning, or as I said, listen to some kind of audio that sets the tone in the morning. And in the evening, reflect on the inputs that you allowed during the day and refine them, prune them, or tighten the filter again tomorrow. And so inputs alone won't save you, but repeated intentional identity-aligned inputs will inevitably shift your default behavior. And the goal is not to stay motivated. The goal is to install a baseline reality where the right actions feel normal and the wrong ones feel foreign. So it's not about how powerful one input is. It's about how relentlessly you feed your system the same message until it becomes your truth. And a 10-minute voice memo you listen to daily could shift your identity more than an entire weekend seminar you forget 2 days later. So immerse yourself in your new narrative so fully that you literally forget how the old one used to feel. And that's basically how you create a new identity. But none of this matters if you keep feeding distractions, if you keep tolerating interruptions and living with noise. So now that you've fortified the system, now it's time to eliminate the viruses that corrupt it, which is basically your distractions. So the next step would be to remove internal distractions. So you can have the clearest goals, the strongest vision, the most detailed identity, and the most powerful inputs. But if your focus is fractured, none of it will convert. Distraction is not just inconvenience, it is identity sabotage. It is the silent killer of transformation. And unlike visible enemies, distractions often disguise themselves as harmless and they don't feel dangerous in the moment, but over time they compound, draining your bandwidth, warping your habits, and making momentum impossible. So if you don't remove them, they'll dissolve every ounce of progress the other steps have created. So distractions pull your attention toward what doesn't matter and away from what does. That alone is damaging, but the deeper consequence is neurological. Every time you respond to a distraction, you reinforce a pattern. That what's urgent is more important than what's essential. And that reaction is better than intention. That interruption is normal. If repeated long enough, this becomes a default setting, a mind built for stimulus response and not actual execution, not strategic execution. So it doesn't take much. A notification here, a glance at the phone there, a quick check of your email mid-task. These micro hits actually destroy your deep work. They degrade your clarity and dismantle your ability to follow through on complex thinking. And the more you respond to distraction, the more your brain craves it, and you build a tolerance to stillness and an addiction to noise. So your future self, the one you designed, is focused, deliberate, disciplined, most likely. And if your current environment trains you to chase every ping, every scroll, every feed, and avoid discomfort through stimulation, then you're living in contradiction. So this creates internal friction, and that friction leads to guilt, inconsistency, and collapse. And you don't need to try harder. You just need to remove the invisible triggers that are sabotaging you before you even begin. And so what you need to do is begin with a full inventory of what pulls your attention on a daily basis. Not just the obvious, not just the extremes, everything. And track it with ruthless precision for 3 to 5 days. So for example, look at your phone, your laptop, your browser, your apps, how many tabs are open, what notifications are on, what's your screen time breakdown? Do you reach for your phone during transitions, after work, before bed, or between tasks? Do you default to consumption when you feel stuck or bored or emotionally low? And look at your space, your environment. Is it engineered for execution, or is it cluttered with confusion? Is your desk clear or scattered? Is your room silent or chaotic? Do your surroundings match the level of focus you claim to want? And where does your focus typically collapse? What physical elements are involved? And look at your interactions. Who texts, who calls, or messages you during key work windows? Are you constantly responding instead of initiating? Are you available to people who shouldn't have access to you? And do you keep chats open while working? Do you let social interruptions set the pace of your day? And finally, look at your mental distractions. Look at your inner distractions. What thoughts are stealing your presence? What loops play in the background? Are you ruminating on past mistakes? Are you fantasizing about the future instead of actually building it, which is what a lot of people are doing? And are you imagining outcomes instead of actually taking steps to achieving them? Are you talking to yourself like a leader, or are you talking to yourself like a victim? And once the audit is done, you need to, again, begin the purge and not hesitate. Do not get sentimental about your distractions. If it costs you focus, then it costs you the very thing you're actually trying to build. Disable notifications, use grayscale, remove every app not directly contributing to your mission. And keep it out of reach during deep work blocks. Put it in another room entirely, and designate specific windows for messages and responses, and never operate reactively. And so another thing you could do is look at your computer, clear the desktop, limit open tabs to one task at a time, and use extensions that block time-wasting sites. Now, you don't have to do this forever, but at least for now, you should start doing that until you learn how to actually control yourself. And when it comes to tab, have one goal per session. If the tab doesn't serve the task, it doesn't stay open. And when we're talking about your environment, use tools like Freedom or Cold Turkey that can temporarily eliminate access to every tempting distraction on your computer. And when it comes to your space, design your physical environment to match the output you actually want to create. Remove anything that reminds you of undone tasks, unresolved decisions, or alternative focuses. And the fewer objects, the fewer options. And fewer options mean faster action. So when it comes to people, reduce access to your attention. Your time is sacred, and it's not communal. It's not interruptible. So train others to respect your focus time and protect it with firmness and not with apology. If someone drains your energy consistently or repeatedly pulls you off course, then limit your exposure. And efficiency sometimes requires insulation. And sometimes you might have to block certain people. Even if, actually, I have done this, you might have to block family in order to be able to do this. So now, when it comes to triggers, identify specific emotional states that drive distraction and develop a protocol for redirecting them. If boredom, for example, makes you scroll, have a default task or question that immediately reroutes your energy. So you're not eliminating the urge, you actually replace the behavior that the urge creates. And so finally, when it comes to replacement, you don't just cut distractions, you actually replace them with anchors that pull you back into deep presence and deliberate action. So for example, in the morning, start each day with intention, not reaction. So no phone, no inbox, no stimulation, just clarity. And use journaling, planning, or even 5 to 10 minutes of stillness to lock in your direction. And this sets the tempo for the day, and that tempo either compounds your power or scatters it. So divide your day into blocks with defined tasks and no tolerance for interruption. 90-minute deep work sessions followed by 15-minute resets. And put your phone in another room. Use noise-canceling headphones. Signal to the world that you're unavailable, because you're working on you, basically. So another thing you could do is have a hard cutoff for digital consumption. Input discipline builds focus, but focus must be paired with deliberate recovery. So power down your devices, lower the lights, use analog tools like paper or whiteboards for review later in the day. And this improves sleep quality, but also cognitive recovery, and the ability to sustain long-term execution. And removing distractions isn't a one-time fix. It's a daily fight. So over time, the brain adapts, the noise fades, the stillness becomes normal, and the clarity will sharpen. And what once felt like effort begins to feel like peace. So the longer you stay clean of distractions, the more intolerant you become to them. You start to feel when your focus is being hijacked, even in subtle ways. And when you notice it, you correct it immediately, without hesitation and without excuse. So this is what I said earlier. You don't have to do this forever, but you need to do this in the beginning, at least until you learn how to control yourself and how to do this on demand. And finally, now that distractions are cleared, the path is open, but clarity without action is just a stalled engine. So it's time to install the habits that make the future version of you not just possible, but inevitable. So the final step to all of this would be installing the powerful habits. So every version of you is built on a structure of habits, not dreams, not goals, not motivation, but habits. So the difference between the life you want and the life you have comes down to what you do automatically, repeatedly, and unconsciously. And that's basically it. So the version of you that's rich, shredded, focused, calm, respected, that version doesn't work harder. It just behaves differently by default. And for them, that isn't work. So reinvention is not sustained by effort. It is engineered through repetition, through ritual, through identity-backed behaviors that run beneath the surface and never need to be negotiated again. So your habits don't just create results, they confirm identity. Every action you take, no matter how small, is a vote for who you believe you are. And with enough votes, that belief becomes unshakable. That's the hidden function of habit. It doesn't just produce change, it solidifies it. That's why trying to change your life without changing your habits is like trying to redesign a building without touching its foundation. It's kind of impossible. So if your current habits reflect your old identity, they will regenerate the same reality no matter how many goals you write down. That's just the reality of it. So you'll wake up, execute the same unconscious rituals, and wonder why nothing is shifting, and you'll mistake stagnation for failure when in fact it's just automation. So you don't need to feel more inspired, you need to behave like someone else. And identity follows action, and action follows habit, and habit follows design. So let's revisit that ABT formula that we talked about in the first step. And finally, we need to add the missing link, which is the H. So A stands for actual, where you are now. B stands for becoming, who you want to become. T stands for timeline, by when you'll make it real. And finally, the H stands for habits, the daily actions that close the gap between where you are and where you're going. So the sequence is from X to Y by Z through H. So from A to B by T through H. From your current state to your future identity by your chosen deadline through the habits that make it inevitable. And so you need to start taking inventory of your existing habits, the ones that you perform daily without resistance or conscious decision, and write them all down. Which of these are actually helping you reinforce your future self? Which of these are, holding you back from your future self, and which of them are actually reinforcing your old self? And early wake times, pre-scheduled workouts, clean meals, journaling, deliberate deep work blocks, all of these can be reinforcing your future self. These are the habits your future self will thank you for. So double down on them. Which ones waste time without giving anything back? Random scrolling, multitasking, unnecessary errands, low impact conversations. These don't hurt, but they don't build either. So they must be redirected or replaced. And finally, which ones keep you looped in your past self's emotional wiring? Skipping workouts, snoozing alarms, eating for comfort, quitting early, talking yourself out of risk. These must be completely eliminated and not moderated. They are anchors disguised as habits. So you have productive, you have neutral, and you have destructive. And finally, you need to construct a ritual blueprint. What specific habits would your future self perform automatically? Not once, not twice, but daily until they no longer required energy or decision. So start the day in the morning, start the day with direction. No phone, no chaos, no drift. Wake, hydrate, movement, review your identity, plan the day, and begin focused execution. And you control the first hour, or the first hour controls you. Now, midday, install anchors that reset energy and sharpen your focus. 10-minute walks, posture reset, breathwork, mini reflections. These habits keep your nervous system regulated and your cognition sharp when others spiral, and it keeps you on track for the rest of the day. Now, at the end of the day, with intention, end the day with intention and reflection. So shut down your tech, review the day, identify where you won, where you drifted, and what you'll adjust tomorrow. And evening habits shape your sleep quality, they shape your cognitive recovery and tomorrow's momentum before it even begins. So if your evening habits are on point, tomorrow has already begun today, basically, in short. And you can control how tomorrow goes through what you do today evening. And so use habit stacking to link new behaviors to existing ones, and this reduces resistance and increases your consistency. So for example, after I make coffee, I open my identity script. Your old habit becomes a trigger. The new habit that way becomes inevitable. So the less you have to decide, the more likely you are to execute. So for example, after I brush my teeth, I review my goals aloud. So you can use the body's automatic rhythms as identity anchors, and this creates habits that are almost impossible to forget. And add rituals that enforce physical and psychological momentum. So for example, cold exposure, cold showers, or ice baths to trigger your mental resilience and reset emotional intensity. And the purpose of cold exposure specifically is discomfort on demand. So the body adapts and the mind strengthens that way. And it reinforces identity as someone who does hard things without hesitation. Now, another one that you could do is daily physical movement, whether it's intense or simple. Just doing some kind of movement will reinforce the new identity. So resistance training, walking, mobility, breath, coordinated movement. You train not just to build the body, but to embody control, to embody discipline and presence. And if you don't track, you don't transform. So simple tools yield extraordinary consistency. So use habit trackers, calendars, or digital apps to monitor execution and check off every action. No gray area, did it or didn't. That's it. Review your totals, refine your systems, and optimize friction points. And the act of tracking turns behavior into evidence. Every completed task builds trust in yourself and belief in inevitability. And when you see progress accumulate visually, motivation becomes irrelevant. So another thing is adaptation. Habits evolve, so must your systems. What works now won't always be enough. As you scale your identity, the pressure, expectations, and complexity also increases. So every quarter, review your habit stack and ask yourself, does this serve the next level of myself? And cut rituals that no longer challenge you or elevate you, and install higher stakes actions that demand more from your attention, execution, and character. And for example, your current habit may be write for 30 minutes. Your upgraded version of that same habit might be publish a post daily by 10 a.m. So do you see how the first habit was for the previous version of yourself, which is just write for 30 minutes, and the version before that maybe didn't even write at all during the day. And now all of a sudden you have write for 30 minutes, but your upgraded version after a quarter, let's say you've done this for 90 days, for a whole quarter or two. Now all of a sudden you need to set a new goal, your upgraded version, which might be publish a post daily by 10 a.m. So progress comes not just from doing, but from actually raising the standard of what done means. And higher level habits force higher level behavior. So habits are slow at first, but they stack like interest. Most people quit before the stack has a chance to actually show any returns. So the first 7 to 14 days are always going to be full with a lot of friction. You're basically rewiring muscle memory or mental memory and mental resistance. So don't chase perfection, just chase consistency. You can miss once, but not twice. So stay locked on identity and not dopamine, and feel progress even if no results have shown yet. You can act, progress is just a mental construct. And in reality, momentum is something you feel. Because if I asked you what momentum is you'll say it's a feeling of. Most likely, it's the feeling of doing something consistently. And so you can create that feeling of momentum in your head, even if it hasn't built up yet. And one of the most powerful feelings to keep us on track is the feeling of momentum. That's why people do the don't break the chain kind of thing, where they put a calendar on their wall and they check off a day every day when they do something. It's because of that feeling of momentum keeps us going even when we don't feel like it. But you can construct that in your mind because it's just a feeling at the end of the day. So feel progress even if no results have shown yet. You can create that feeling of momentum in your head. And after 30 to 60 days, your system will begin to solidify. And what used to drain your effort or what used to drain effort now runs quietly in the background. And you build up force, it gets easier to sustain and way harder to derail. So this is the final layer, the invisible architecture that makes all other change permanent. Without habits, vision is just fantasy. Identity is just performance, just an act, and focus is just fragile. Inputs are just noise, but once you install habits that reflect the person you are becoming and repeat them until they become second nature, then you don't just hope for change, you actually enforce it. You hardwire it and you live by it, because now your life isn't powered by just emotion or occasional motivation. It's now powered by systems that run with or without your mood. Systems that make your evolution automatic. And when that happens, the outcome is no longer a question. It's just a matter of time. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let's review what we talked about. So we went over the overview. We went over the defining your North Star, constructing a new identity, controlling your daily inputs, removing internal distractions, installing powerful habits. And right now we are at the review. And finally, your action items for the day or the next few days. First, write down your actual becoming timeline for each core domain: health, wealth, love, and self. And make it specific, make it measurable, and make it time-bound. No vague outcomes, no soft deadlines. Just define the future in terms so clear that you can't misunderstand them. Next, script your new identity in full detail. Personality, behavior, energy, language, circle, environment, and read it daily. Speak it out loud and let repetition turn it into reality. Then align your inputs to feed that identity and cut every distraction that competes with it. And finally, build your system of habits, daily, repeatable, automatic, morning, midday, and nighttime. Track them, refine them, and make them sacred. Because when your actions reflect your vision consistently, the results become inevitable. So with that being said, as I said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it brought a lot of value, and I'll see you in the next one.